Well, I'm back in the assembly room. I know I promised I was going to get the magneto on and get it timed to the tractor, but when I looked at the magneto that I had set aside for this project, I realized that it hadn't been gone through yet, and so I'm going to have an episode on going through that magneto, taking it apart and reassembling it and fixing what I can. So that'll be left for another time, but for this episode, I'm going to work on the fuel system. I've got a tank here that I found that is pretty decent shape, and I'm going to overhaul that. Have to fix one of the bungs on the top side that's been torn off, and then all the plumbing on the bottom end of the tank that has to be redone. So once we get the tank done, why then we'll get the carburetor on the tractor and get the float set and get that all prepped and ready to go. So here we are at the tractor with the carburetor that I've rebuilt. I put a new float in there and put in a new hinge for the float and a new pin through here for the float. And if at all possible, if you can get those parts, why you should definitely put those in, because it's really hard to set a carburetor if those pieces are worn out. There's only one thing that you can't correct with new parts, and that is the seat that's virgin bored into the bowl itself. So other than that, you can try to correct a lot of the other problems that the carburetor has. This one here has very little wear in the throat, usually down in the bottom end where the butterfly works. It'll have a ridge in there, and that really should be filled in and machined back to round if you can. Also, the bushings on the throttle shaft are usually worn bad, and those are very difficult to replace, because you have to be able to set up on a mill or something and center and drill those bosses out so that you can put a bushing in there. There originally were no bushings in there, but if you have a boring machine that you can center up and bore these bosses out to put a bushing in, that's really what it needs to happen. If it's really badly worn, that's really the only way to correct that. So with this one, it wasn't too bad a shape, so that's the one I'm going to use. So I'm going to bolt that on. And the good thing about these style of carburetors or air mixers, it's really not a carburetor. Oh, one other thing, this flange here is usually warped, because sitting on the tractor for over all the years that it's been on there, it'll rust in that gasket, and it'll push that flange apart and bend the ears just slightly. And so if you don't machine this flat, or I just used a really nice file and went across it and filed it flat with a hand file, since I don't have a surfacing machine, and so that you can get that gasket to seal up. Otherwise, you're going to suck air in through that gasket if you don't try to make some attempt to get everything faced. And one thing about these carburetors that I was mentioning before, you can take the top off of them, and you can actually see the fuel level and measure it. And it's kind of critical to these carburetors that you have the correct fuel level. So we'll get this bolted up, and then we'll get some fuel into it and see what the level looks like. Then you can hook up your water valve rod. But I've rigged up a funnel. Maybe I need to turn it up just a bit. I've put a hose on a funnel, and so I can attach it to the fuel line. And then I can pour in some gas up above. Here, I'll lift up the camera just a bit so you can see what I'm doing. But I'll put fuel in and see where the level ends up in the carburetor. So from the service manual, it's supposed to be 3/16 to a 1/4 inch below the fuel nozzle, which is right down here in the center. And if you measure down to the top of the fuel nozzle, to the top of this rim is 1.5 inches to the top of here. And so we need to be like 1.75 inches to the fuel level. So if we go down in here, just till you touch the gas, and I am 1.5 inches. And it seems to be not holding. Try this again. We'll pour the gas back in. We will try this again and see if it stops a little quicker. So this little arm right here on the float, you can see that right there and there. That's got to be bit in order to get the correct level. And I found these really small little needle nose pliers that I was able to get that in here and bend that just a little bit. And so we'll see what the level looks like now. Put my thumb over that. Pour the gas in and see where it should be around 1.3 inches. Okay, that's where it stopped at. And then I'll go to the level of the gas down here and look across that barrel. Okay, there's my level. And I'm just a little bit short of 1.75 inches. And in the book it says it should be 3/16 to a 1/4 inch below the fuel nozzle in the center. So 1.75 inches on the outside here to the fuel level, looking across the barrel. If it was at 1.75 inches, that would be a 1/4 inch below, because the nozzle is 1.5 inches from the nozzle to the top of the barrel. I'm down between 1/4 and 3/16, so I think that's just about right. So I can put my carburetor cap back on. And I can put the top of my carburetor back on. So there's a cork gasket in the center in here. The outside really doesn't need a gasket. It's important that you have a cork or a good contact gasket in there to where it squashes down. Okay, so top of carburetor is on. This is supposed to be set at 1/2 inch between the knurl nut and the lock nut. And that's a spring on the choke valve. Let me consult the book first. Okay, so the distance between the lock nut and the bottom of the knurl nut should be 1/2 inch to 5/8. I'm not quite there. That's right at 1/2 inch. It seems to be out too far, but that's what the book says. See this distance right here? It says the air valve adjusting screw should be set to 1/2 to 5/8 inch space between the lock nut and the knurled head. Keep lock nut tight. So that should be about right. There's still tension on that valve in there, so we'll try that. And then the main jet underneath here is supposed to be 1 1/4 turns to start, and then adjust it so it's right at the fuel line. So we'll go around 1 1/4. That's the start, and then adjust it so it runs nice. And then this goes in there. Line right here, I'll have to fit that in and put a cotter key in that. And the throttle, take this tag off and make sure you don't lose that plunger back in there. And that should be adjusted so I think there's just a little bit of tension on that butterfly. The butterfly should be just a little past the hole, so it's clear up against the stop with just a freckle extra travel, so it will close clear up. And then the next thing is to put the tank together. So we'll go over there and put the plumbing back on the tank, and then all we'll have to do is set the tank on and screw in the fitting, and we'll be ready to go as far as the fuel is concerned. So these were the fittings that were in there. This one's not too bad a shape. Got all the threads in it yet. The screen is a little deteriorated. I'll have to redo that, but that was in there. And the way I got that out of there is with this little pipe wrench. It's a good rigid pipe wrench with good jaws, and it'll bite in good. And so I was able to remove that without tearing the bung out of the bottom of the tank. And then on this piece here, this is the one that goes in here, and it was really rounded off, and the screen was completely gone. But it was a bugger getting it out of there. But what I did, I took this plug out here first, and I was able to find a piece of ready rod to kind of halfway screw in there. Because if you put a lot of leverage on this fitting here, you could break the solder around the bottom of this tank. So I put that in there to kind of stabilize that bung that's in the bottom, and then I was able to finally get that to turn out of there. I put a little cheater on my pipe wrench and finally broke it loose without destroying anything. So when you work on these tanks, most of these parts are kind of irreplaceable. I did have a few of these extra that are new, so I don't have to reuse that one. But you got to be really careful on what you do with these tanks, and you don't want to make the situation worse than what it is, having to resolder that in or resoldering this in or turn the bottom of the tank out. A lot of times they're pretty thin, they're rusted from the inside, so you got to be very careful with that. And I'll take you over here to my vise, and I'm working on the fuel shutoff. Okay, so the fuel shutoff, I've got it on this sediment bowl that it'll screw onto, and it holds it pretty good, and then I can clamp it in the vise without hurting the valve at all. I don't want to clamp it in and crush that cylinder in there, because that'll make it even more difficult to get it apart. But anyway, I took the top cap off where the spring and the packing is at, and I put penetrating oil in there and left that overnight. And now we're going to see if that cylinder will come out of there. You don't want to give it very much, because those little handles will not take a lot of abuse. So you want to take everything really cautious when you work on these. There, see, it came loose without even using the handle. So And so need to just clean that up, blow out the valve. This is the can't leak valve that John Deere used back in the early days of the D. And have to dig this packing out, and there's a little spring in there. It's usually crusted in there pretty good, so it takes a little work. But I found with the Model A Fords, they have some of their fuel valves use the same packing and nut and washer, and then there's a little lubricant in there that's gas resistant. And so I can get these through the Model A store, and they're very handy. That little packing will fit right in there. It's made for this kind of valve. And then if you need a nut or a washer, they're in there extra, and there's some instruction sheets in there too. So that's pretty handy to have and easy to get if you know where to go. I've got a little a die here that fits the threads on here, on these threads here. So I can clean those up, because you don't want to put a lot of strain on those fuel lines when you're tightening them up, because they'll break or crimp or whatever. So I try to get everything chased here so all of the ferrules go on easily. And with that, I will try to get this apart. Kind of the best way I've found is to put it back on there and maybe give it a little tap. See if anything came out the bottom. Not really. It looks like they did some extra packing in there for some reason. Well, they probably couldn't keep it from leaking, but oh, I see what they did. They put the packing in on the wrong side. That's what, the spring's up on top and the packing's on the bottom. So that was not put in there correctly. And it's rare that you can even get those packings out of there without destroying them. See if that budged it at all. Yeah. So there's the packing, and there's a little washer in there that goes up against the packing. Sometimes that is corroded. That one's not very good shape. That little washer would have been nice if they would have put that in the kit. But I think you can get this spring too through the Model A store. But anyway, got all the guts out of it, and now I just need to scrape that all out of there. Get it all shined up nice. Okay, I will work on getting all the parts ready to reassemble, and then I'll be back. I cleaned everything up and ready to put it together, and there's a little bit of lubricant in here in this kit. So make sure you utilize that. Try to get them to turn as easily as possible. I don't know how long this would last with the gas and stuff, but you want to put the packing on first, and then smear a little bit of that on this stem. Doesn't have to be a great amount. And then I marked the top of the stem where the pointer goes on the handle, so to get that right. But that goes in first. And then the little washer to protect the packing from the spring. And then you got to press this down on there. I think maybe I'll put some more grease in there. Maybe it'll slide a little bit better. And then this handle has a little pointer on the other side. Usually the handle is the pointer. It goes according to the off, gas, and kerosene setting, but I'm going to put this on the way the pointer is. Never really seen one with a pointer on the handle like that. But maybe it's not a John Deere handle either, I don't know. Tighten up the packing nut a little. So that's off, and then gas and kerosene. If I don't like how the handle is orientated, I can change it later. And it may not turn. It might hit the tank, so when it goes up here, it might hit the tank, so it might not work that way. But I'm gonna see if that'll work. So anyway, that valve's ready to go. Cleaned up the threads. So we'll move on back to the tank and put the fittings in it. So this is another valve, and I've already put the packing on the stem and putting the stem in there. The reason I'm showing this is this one's got a different handle on it. It doesn't have the pointer on it. It's basically identical to it though, but we're gonna put the handle on a different way. But then I've lubricated the packing and the stem, and the washer goes next to the packing, and then the spring goes in. And I've lubricated the inside of that ferrule a little bit, so the packing will slip down on it. And I marked the stem so I know which way to put the handle on. And right there, this time I'm putting the handle on the other way. Okay, that one turns easy. That's the way they should turn. We'll tighten that packing down a little more. Okay. So we got two to choose from. Got those two to choose from. I've cleaned up the front valve. I got a couple here with nice screens on them, and I run the chaser on the threads, and I've got a little cock here to shut it off. So those are done. Two to choose from there. This cock goes in the bottom of the sump. I like to put a cock in there so I can hook a hose on here and then hook a little hose on there, and I can dump that into the gas container to drain the tank when I'm done with it. So I'll put that in the bottom instead of just a plug. And then that's about it. We'll go work on the tank. So I'm set up here to weld this bung back in, solder it back in. A lot of times the cap would get rusted in the bung, and then they'd put a pipe wrench on trying to get the cap off, and they'd pull the bung out of the tank. So you see this quite often, that bung has been ripped out of there. So I've got it melted off the existing solder and buffed it up with the wire wheel and buffed the bung with the wire wheel also. Now I'm putting on some paste to allow the solder to stick. Hopefully, since both parts had solder on them already, that they'll solder readily. Once you clean it off, you don't want to get contaminants on it. And I have cleaned the tank all out, vacuumed and aired. Use the air gun. So center that on there. You don't want to do this if the tank had recently had gas in it. It has a tendency to explode, but this one hasn't had gas in it for a long time. So I think I'm safe. I can't smell any gas in the tank, so I think we're probably good to go. The tin will heat up pretty readily, but you want to make sure you get that bung hot. I think that's looking pretty good. You don't really want to put the fire directly on the solder, but just kind of melt it from the heat of the bung. I think we'll let that cool and see what it looks like. Use the wire brush and clean it up again. If I need to add a little bit more, I can. And then once I finish that up, I'll flip it over and start putting the fittings in the bottom. So the trick to these fittings is to get them all orientated when everything's tight, that the handle on the valve is in the correct position. So I'm putting on a little bit of Teflon thread sealant on here. This connection here is a little temperamental. So I think that'll work. Then we'll put this front valve in and fit the copper line in then. So that's going to tighten up just about with the right orientation right there. This fitting on the end there is just a little bit bent. Okay, everything's together now. Hopefully it doesn't leak. One more fitting to put in, fitting right here. Just a little bit of thread sealer on there is all it takes. The fuel system's pretty well ready to go. And onto the magneto. And if you like this content, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can see all the episodes, working up to getting this 25 Spoker D running. And we'll see you down the road.